Welcome to the Book Blast podcast, our international podcast series Bridging the Divide, Translation and the Art of Empathy, showcases a selection of the best writing in translation from around the world being published this year in the UK by 10 leading independent houses, along with a special guest feature. Today I am interviewing Beka Adamashvili and his translator Tamar Japaridze. A leading writer of his generation in Georgia, Beka Adamashvili's satirical prose is mischievous and entertaining, and he has won numerous awards, including the European Prize for Literature. His novel Bestseller was a literary phenomenon in Georgia when it came out in 2014, and has just been published by Dedalus Books in English. Tamar Japaridze has translated over 30 literary works from English into Georgian, including the writing of Harold Pinter, Arundhati Roy, Irvine Welsh, Bernardine Evaristo, Margaret Atwood and Kazuo Ishiguro. Good afternoon, Beka. Thank you for doing this interview. Why tell stories?
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting us to this podcast. Before I start, I want to mention two things. My writing skills are much better than my speaking skills, and my novel is funnier than my English pronunciation. I hope at least. And now about stories. One of the main reasons why we tell stories is that we are naturally born as storytellers, because it's in our DNA to tell stories. We are telling them from the very ancient time on the walls of caves or in tribes around the fire. And stories make our life more interesting, because if you imagine any conversation without at least one story, it will be too boring, even in our imagination. Because if we speak about the weather all the time or just describe the nature in our everyday conversations, no one will be happy to be part of these conversations. So I think stories are just the fuel that makes us move forward in our life.
So when you were growing up, what books had an impact on you, both perhaps Georgian and also in translation?
I was born and grew up in the 90s in Georgia, and it was the best of times and it was the worst of times for us, because the best thing was that we became independent country from Soviet Union, and the worst thing was that we had several wars and other difficulties related to the lack of money, lack of food and electricity. So books became the only shelters from this hard reality for me. Most of them were from classic authors, because we had only those books which were collected by our grandparents and our parents. And among them were books of Dickens, for example, Jules Verne, Alexander Dumas, Astrid Lindgren, and of course Arthur Conan Doyle. Sherlock Holmes was the best hero in my childhood. And I remember I was 11 when I read The Hunchback of Notre Dame and The Man Who Laughs from Victor Hugo. But the only thing I can recall from those books now is that they were too thick. And definitely not the best thing which you can get from those novels. But I don't remember anything other. And later I started to read postmodern literature, and it made the most impact on me, including Kurt Vonnegut, José Saramago, Paul Auster, and so on.
Because you were just emerging, separating from Soviet Russia, there weren't Georgian legends, or was it Russian literature that you read as well, more locally? What was your reading?
Yeah, there were also Georgian books, but I don't think that no one knows those authors which I read in my childhood from Georgian, and I did not mention it, but there were, of course, some authors which made my childhood better than it was. For example, we have Nodar Dumbadze, such writer, fun writer, and as I mentioned, she is not well known in Great Britain, I think.
So to what extent, because you're a journalist and a blogger, so to what extent is that essential training for a would-be writer?
Yeah, there is one Latin saying. Generally, I'm not the big fan of Latin language, maybe because of necrophobia, I don't know. But I like this saying, which is null days sine linea, and it means no day without a line. So if you want to become a writer, or at least to publish a book, you need to write every day. Like if you want to win any athletic tournament, you should spend several hours every day in gym. And in this case, yes, everything that forces you to write systematically, it does not matter if it is an article or blog post or just status on Facebook, is essential training to have better results in the field of literature.
So Bestseller is an entertaining, laugh-out-loud read which flies in the face of literary pretentiousness and posturing. It is underpinned, though, by a profound knowledge of the classics of world literature, from Sartrean existentialism, Pirandello and the absurd, and then there are famous writers like Dante and Conan Doyle and George Orwell who enter the narrative alongside your fictional characters. How did the book come about? How did it all come together? Because it works very beautifully, like a sort of concert, really. It's like a concert of voices and jokes and insights.
Thank you. The main storyline in Bestseller, and especially in the literary hell, is that all famous and unknown writers are tortured in the same ways as their books torture the readers. So the main inspiration for this book was plenty of classic writers, which I mentioned above already, and I just wanted to punish them for making my childhood even harder. For example, I mean those writers who were describing nature during several pages or buildings or something. I don't know any person who is in love with nature descriptive pages. Moreover, I don't know any person who does not hate it. So these writers are sitting in literary hell now, reading the books where all pages are missing except those ones where there are nature descriptions. And there are also some kind of natural punishments too. For example, James Joyce is trying to write a footnote of all his footnotes and so on. So the main inspiration were those classic writers for this book and their books.
Yes, footnotes get quite a starring role, don't they? Now, what is it? You have a thing with footnotes?
I did not like footnotes in my childhood because all writers were like, I know everything, you don't know nothing, and they were explaining something which was not so much important. For example, someone was born in some year, I did not interested in it, so I just wanted to make parody on those footnotes. I don't know how I did it.
So Ernest Hemingway, Yukio Mishima, Sylvia Plath, Virginia Woolf and Hunter S. Thompson are among the more famous literary suicides. Does your central character, Pierre Sonnage, who decides to commit suicide on his 33rd birthday, actually want to die? Or is it just a case of not wanting to live the life he has? What really is the seed of his desperation, his despair?
At first, my intention was to indicate the world where people are ready to do almost anything to become popular. So my character had not any specific reason to commit suicide except the desire to make his books more recognized with this marketing activity. But then when I was applying for the master degree in comparative literature at university, I had an interview with my future lecturers, and one of them prized me during this interview for referencing Roland Barthes' idea about the death of the author, since the main character is a writer and he commits suicide in the beginning of the book. And I asked him the only thing who Roland Barthes was, because I did not know anything about Roland Barthes, but I liked this kind of explanation, and since then I use it to explain the decision of Pierre Sonnage, and I say that it just reflects the concept of the death of the author by Roland Barthes, and I like this explanation.
So what or who inspired the 8 points of the Decanon?
At first I will clarify what Decanon is. It's kind of rules like the 10 Commandments, but for writers. For example, instead of "you shall not murder," there is "do not kill a mockingbird," or instead of "you shall not steal," there is "do not plagiarize." I hope I pronounced it correctly. I don't think that I am God, of course, and those rules are too far from ideality. But the main inspirations of those rules are some authors, some Georgians and also foreign authors, which I read before. Some of them used too much ellipsis, for example, in their writings, and they tried to make it more sentimental with ellipsis, or some of them pretended to be very intellectual and know-all persons, and so on. But first of all, these rules are for me to avoid these things in the future which are mentioned there, or at least to refuse them and to think how wrong I was several years earlier when I wrote these rules.
You have a young lady, Lucy, character Lucy. Lucy did not like crowded places. Accordingly, she loved the presentations of books. She was especially fond of unknown writers, those who were surprised to see more than 3 unfamiliar people at their own presentations. Why is she a writer's ideal reader?
I'm not sure whether she is ideal or not, but she has several characteristics that I appreciate in readers. At first, she is a detail-oriented type of reader. She has not an aim to read as many books as possible in a short time period, because there are some people who are proud of that they can read fast and they miss sometimes main points. Besides, Lucy often writes about those books that she reads. And it's the best way to analyze what did you understand from that book. And sometimes she likes to promote unknown writers, which is the best characteristic, because most of reader like those books which are already appreciated by other people, by influencers. So she likes unknown writers, and I like it too, that she likes it.
So where did the idea for the anonymous suicide club in Literary Hell come from? I mean, do you dream? There's something almost sort of like an existentialist nightmare, actually. But anyway, I sort of, where's it, the roots of that?
Yeah, I don't remember where this idea came from, to be honest. But it was not a dream for sure, because my dreams are very down to earth, as usual. I just had some theories about some writers that they committed suicide in reality, but the world did not confirm it due to different reasons. For example, I had the theory that Antoine Saint-Exupéry, which disappeared during the war mission, I thought it was some kind of suicide because he did not like this universe anymore. And also I had the same theory about Jerome Salinger, who lived far from the rest of the world in some kind of part of the earth, and maybe it was not death, maybe it was just suicide caused by boredom or something. So I just collected all those writers in one place as an anonymous suicide squad or something like this.
Now, bestseller, the title, and bestseller, the theme. A bestseller is not a particularly good book, you write, but it's neither bad, of course. It's something like the fact that happiness is not in money, but it is not entirely in the lack of money either. Why is it then that only some, not all, the bestsellers of one country manage to cross cultural boundaries and travel abroad to find new readers? And how helpful is social media with all of this? And referring to your book, Bestseller, I mean, how far has it travelled? Which countries? And was it a surprise bestseller? That's a lot of questions, of course.
Yeah. Yes. In our century, social media always can be helpful if you use it properly and not just as a media channel where you just upload some files or something. Yeah. But regarding Bestseller, I think the main reason of its success, if we can call this success translating in other languages, is there it's not about local things, it's about international things, because the universe there is familiar for almost all readers from all other countries. And if you write about local things, it gets harder to cross the international or cultural borders. But when this topic is global, for example, world literature, you can success it. And another reason, I think, is the plot of book, because too many novels are written every day, and there are also plenty of competitors in the field of stealing people's time. For example, movies, video games, social networks, and so on. So you have too little chance to grab someone's attention in the situation, and you have just several sentences to write on the back cover of the book. And that's why the plot is important, because no one cares about your brilliant metaphors or wonderful characters on page 68 if they don't buy a book for another reason to read until page 68.
So how much actually your experiences in advertising have
4 years
seeped into the narrative in an extent that would have influenced what kind of, that would have perhaps influenced some of it?
Advertising, how advertising influences?
You would have seen how people promote, and that there's a sort of anyway.
When I published Bestseller in 2014, I knew almost nothing about advertising, not to mention the creative director's position, which I am now. But my intention was to make some kind of parody about everything. For example, about cliches in books and movies, like, for example, is in Hollywood movies, when half of the town is destroyed, thousands of people die, cars are exploded, and we are happy because Bruce Willis is survived, and one of his relatives too. Or I want to make parody on in novels. For example, when there is a silence in the room, there is always a clock that ticks and ruins the silence. Or in Georgian books, there is always one fly who flies around the room. Even if it is winter and it's snowing outside, there is always one fly which survived the winter just to ruin the silence in the room. And also, I wanted to have parody about cheesy romantic quotes, which are always popular in social networks. But then some people perceived these quotes, mine quotes, as a real one, and they started to share them in social networks. One of the favorites was, "I have put a full stop to our relationship so many times that in the end I got an ellipsis, so I continued." It was just a parody about the romantic quotes, but some people liked it, so they started to share to their sweethearts this quote. But the main point was to make a parody about everything, including celebrities and maybe advertising business too.
So Bestseller was a runaway success when it came out in 2014. How do you keep a cool head under pressure?
It was really hard. That's why I had a fear of potential feedback from the audience after the second book was published. Feedbacks like, okay, it was good, but the first book was better. Or even without the first sentence, just first book was better, which is worse, of course, because in the first case it was good at least, and it's not here. And my fear became reality partially, because part of those people who liked the bestseller said that they were expecting more, unlike those people who did not know the bestseller at all and mostly liked the second novel.
Well, could you tell us a bit about the second novel then, just in a nutshell?
Its name is Everybody Dies in this novel, and it's about a character who realizes that he is a fictional character, and he can travel through books, through other books, and he decides to use this superpower to save all other characters from the evil writers, for example, from William Shakespeare or some other writers who like to kill his or her characters in their books. But then he he finds out that his own author is going to kill someone in his own book because its name is Everybody Dies in this novel. And then he collects all characters of this book and tries to transfer them from postmodernism into better part of the world literature, more safer parts of world literature, for example, Robinson Crusoe's Island or Astrid Lindgren's book or something.
So what are you working on next?
For now, the only thing I work on is to start working on something because of my job. When you work at advertising business and you should do creative work every day, you have not any creativity after working that, but I have plenty of sentences, paragraphs, ideas in my Microsoft Word file, but they are not connected yet. So I'm looking for the main storyline to use all this stuff and build something unique, which will not be a parody on cliches anymore, because when you write 2 books about cliches and you are going to write 3rd books about cliches, it becomes cliche itself. So I don't want to write it. And the only thing I know for now is that I want to write fairy tales, but in the postmodern epoch. And I don't know what will be from there, but I will try.
Well, thank you. So good afternoon, Tamar. Over to you. How did you become a translator, and how did you end up translating Bestseller?
Good afternoon, dear. Well, I was very young, about 22 years, when I started working on my thesis for the 2nd degree, university degree in sociolinguistics. And namely, I was working on child lore in literature. I could not avoid Rudyard Kipling. Yeah, he's just so storied. So I had to translate several examples into Georgian, and someone liked them very much. And one of the publishing houses just then suggested me to translate the whole book. This was how it all started. As for Bestseller, Beckett told me that he had read several translators' works and he stopped his choice on me. So I was happy to do it. That's it.
So Georgian culture is said to have a strong national identity, a unique kind of polyphony, an ancient literary tradition based on the Georgian language and alphabet, ballads and legends. Is this a cliché? Or is it actually true? What are its roots?
It's true. It's true. Generally, Georgian language is one of the ancient languages, taking its origin from the 1st millennium BC. It's one of the branches of the Caucasian languages, but it differs even from the other Caucasian languages. Not to speak about Indo-European languages, it's quite different. With a very complicated grammar and all, you know. And yes, of course, we have a lot of legends and myths and very rich folklore in general. To give you the overall idea of who we are and how ancient are our roots, it would be enough to say that Colchis, to which the Argonauts sailed in search of the Golden Fleece, is part of Georgia. It's Western Georgia, in fact. And Medea, whether you like her or not, was a Georgian lady. So we are very, very ancient people with ancient and very rich culture. We also have our unique script. Actually, we used to have 3 scripts, but nowadays we use only 1. So it's not a Latin script. It's individual Georgian script. What else can I say? Yes, we are very ancient with very rich culture, very interesting language, very difficult language, by the way, which does not look at all like Indo-European languages. The first surviving writing dates back to the 5th century, and it is quite refined, which proves that we had a big tradition of writing already in the 5th century.
So what is Shota Rustaveli? I have heard about him. He's a great writer, poet.
Rustaveli is already the 12th century, and it's a poem, absolutely wonderful. It has been translated into English several times. Marjorie Wardrobe translated it for the first time, and last year, if I'm not mistaken, someone also translated it into English. I'm not familiar with that translation, but it was she, and she was awarded even the prize for that.
A translator is faced by singular challenges when translating literature in terms of fidelity to the original lexicon, content, localization, the period, the author's meaning. What were the particular issues you had to deal with when translating Bestseller into English?
Generally, I always try to be very loyal to the author and the text, because it's crucial, in fact, to be loyal. Otherwise, there would be no use of writing the author's name on the cover if you change a lot. So I was very loyal to the text. I mean, Beka's text. Challenges, well, his style, which is very interesting, is full of, it's parody, but besides that, it's full of humor, it's full of puns, idioms, rephrased idioms, so which is a serious challenge for a translator because, idioms and puns do not coincide. They are different in different languages. So this was what was the really biggest challenge. I can even give you one example. Everyone knows that all roads lead to Rome. And, well, Rome, the word Rom is Rome in Georgian, and besides it's a conjunction showing some kind of hesitation, not understanding the situation very well. So the challenge was to find something like that in English. So I stopped on all roads led to roaming in the gloaming. There was no other way out.
Well, it works. It works. Difficult.
Yes. Yes, and it worked. I hope so. Anyway, Beka, the main thing is that Beka seems to be content with this translation, which means that I managed somehow to maintain the 95% of his style. Very interesting style indeed.
So why is he such a special writer in your view? And in what way is his writing universal?
He is very special because he has a very particular, very unique style of writing. I've told you, full of puns and idioms and even rephrased idioms. He's playing with the words all the time. And his humor is wonderful. Why is he universal? Because his humor is universal. I mean, for the civilized world, anyway. So it's comprehensible for everyone. And that makes him universal. Very lively text, excellent text, and good humor. So everyone with a good sense of humor will enjoy his writing, I'm sure.
Yes, and even if you don't know all of the characters or the books referred to, it is still very entertaining, and because it is extraordinary, the wealth of knowledge. I mean, did you have to do research?
I cannot say that I did a lot of search, but I kept in close touch with Beka. I mean, we wrote emails to each other very often, and we just discussed some details. Sometimes when I didn't understand, when I came across the author that I haven't read, I should confess, I had to search it in the internet or somewhere, and there were the cases that when I didn't know them. That was it. I don't think that I needed some special deep research in something.
No, so he was quite involved. You had an exchange. It wasn't, so...
He was involved. I sent every little bit of my translation to him, and he was very scrupulous about it. He read it several times, and then very attentively, by the way. He's not only a good writer, he's an excellent editor, I should say. He has excellent sense of language. Any language.
George Steiner, the Franco-American literary critic, essayist, philosopher, novelist, and educator, who wrote extensively about the relationship between language, literature, and society, and the impact of the Holocaust, famously said, "The study of translation is a study of language." Is all communication translation?
Absolutely, I agree. Because when we communicate our thoughts and ideas and even emotions and feelings, what do? We just transfer them into verbal codes. So we translate them into verbal codes, into words, to communicate them to other people. So, of course, every communication is translation. And if you are a good translator in that sense, your communication is always successful.
We'll read a page in Georgian and then in English, but I wanted to ask you quickly, you founded a school in Tbilisi.
Yeah.
So tell us just a tiny bit about what that school is, and then we'll do the reading.
Ours is a British Georgian school, which means that we're doing both curricula, mainly core subjects from both curricula. And our students pass GCSE exams and A-level exams. We are the center. Even if a person from Britain is staying in Georgia and he needs to pass those exams, he should come to our center. Yes. So we are one of the 185 centers of British schools. That's it. The school exists already for 15 years. And we have two headmistress and a headmaster. And our headmaster is English. Christopher Greenfield, by the way, he is a very famous English headmaster with a big experience. So it's very interesting and very challenging. It's not an easy school because our kids are doing both curricula. And it's hard to get there, and it's hard to learn there. So, but it is pretty successful.
So now, please, would you both read to us a page in Georgian? So, Beka, if you would read in Georgian, and then Tamar, the same page in English.
It's not the best part of the book, because if we read the best part, then readers will not fight. We
don't want a plot spoiler, indeed.
Yeah, it's just a small part where personage, the main character, tries to commit suicide with several ways. So it's in Georgian at first. დიახ, პიერმა გადაწყვიტა თავის საკუთარი შემოქმედებისათვის შეეწირა, რადგან იცოდა, რომ სიკვდილს აქვს ერთი უკვდავი უნარი, გაზარდოს პატივისცემა ადამიანთა მიმართ. საუკუნო დიდების მისაღწევად კი თავის მოკლა ერთადერთ ამოსავალ წერტილად ჩანდა, რადგან პიერმა იცოდა კიდევ ერთი აპრობირებული მაქსიმა, რომ უკვდავებისთვის უპირველეს ყოვლისა სიკვდილია საჭირო. თუმცა ვინაიდან კაცი ცხოვრებაში თავს ასე თუ ისე ერთხელ იკლავს, პიერსაც სურდა ამ მოვლენას ღირსშესანიშნავად და პომპეზურად ჩაევლო. შესაბამისად, თვითმკვლელობის დაგეგმვას დიდი ხნით ადრე შეუდგა. თავის მოსაკლავად თოკის გამოყენება თავიდანვე გამორიცხა, რადგან თოკი, რომელიც პიერმა ყარადაში აღმოაჩინა, ისეთივე გაცვეთილი იყო, როგორც თავად თოკის გამოყენების მეთოდი. ამის გამო გადაიფიქრა პისტოლეტიც. ჯერ ერთი სანამ სასხლეტს გამოჰკრავდა, ისედაც ერთ სიკვდილს გაათავებდა მანამდე და მეორეც. მთელი გულით სწამდა, რომ მისი ტვინის სიკვდილის შემდეგ განსათავსებლად რიგითი ოთახის რიგით კედელზე გაცილებით მეტს იმსახურებდა. თუნდაც სპეციალური ხსნარით სავსე გამჭვირვალე ქილასა და სამუზეუმო ვიტრინაში ამაყად გამოფენას. ერთი პირობა ისიც იფიქრა დამაძინებლის 33 აბს დავალებო, მაგრამ მერე მიხვდა, რომ მისი გაკვეთის შემდეგ აბების რაოდენობას მაინც არავინ დაითვლიდა და ეს სიმბოლიზმი სამუდამო საიდუმლოდ დარჩებოდა მსოფლიო მწერლობის ისტორიაში. ცხადია, გამოსამშვიდობელ წერილში შეეძლო ამგვარ კავშირზე თავისუფლად მიეთითებინა, მაგრამ აბა როგორი წასაკითხია. აი, მე ახლა 33 წელს ხდები და ამიტომ 33 აბი დამაძინებლის მიღება გადავწყვიტე. არა, გაიფიქრა პიერმა, ისეთი პრიმიტიულია, მაგის გაკეთებას მირჩევნია თავი მოვი.
Oh, thank you. My goodness. Okay, Tamar, over to you.
Oh, yes. Pierre decided to sacrifice himself to his creative life as he knew that death has one immortal feature. It boosts respect. Suicide was the only way for him to achieve eternal glory, because he knew another proven maxim too. A man had to die to gain a deathless fame. As one can commit suicide more or less only once in life, he wanted the event to happen with dignity and pomp. Therefore, he began to prepare for it far in advance. He refused to use the rope from the very start, since the rope which he had found in his closet was just as worn out as the suicide method by hanging itself. He rejected the idea of shooting himself for the same reason. Besides, he would die with fear before pulling the trigger. What's more important, he was absolutely sure that his brain deserved to be kept in a better place, say a glass of container with a special liquid proudly exposed in a museum, than on an ordinary wall. He even had thought of taking 33 sleeping pills, but later realized that after autopsy nobody would be able to count the amount of the pills, and this smart symbolism would remain an eternal secret for the history of the world literature. True, he could indicate it in his suicide note, but the sentence, "I'm 33 now, so I've decided to take 33 sleeping pills," would sound pretty odd, and he would rather die than write such rubbish.
Goodness me. And thank you very much. Bestseller by Beka Adamashvili, translated by Tamar Japaridze, is published by Dedalus Books and is available from online outlets such as Waterstones, Foils, Daunt Books, Hive and Amazon. To buy Bestseller from your local independent bookseller, you can find your nearest store by visiting booksellers.org.uk/bookshop search. This podcast is brought to you by Book Blast. For more bookishness between episodes, visit online journal The Book Blast Diary or find us on Twitter @Book Blast. Special thanks to sound editor Rupert Such, theme tune composer Edward Campbell, Beka Adamashvili and Tamar Japaridze for taking the time to be interviewed. And thank you all for listening to this week's episode of the Book Blast podcast.